Hey, this is Richard with a trip report on Aer Lingus's business class service between Boston and Dublin.
Aer Lingus runs 2 daily non-stop flights to Dublin out of Boston's Logan Airport. There's a late afternoon 5:30 p.m. departure that gets into Dublin at about 4:30 the next morning. The other flight leaves at 9:25 in the evening, with a scheduled arrival in Dublin of 8:25 the next day.
My wife and I booked that one, Flight 136, because we figured we'd have a better chance at getting early check-in at our hotel if we arrived there around 10 a.m. as opposed to, say, 6 a.m. And if not, we wouldn't have as much time to kill before our room was ready.
We booked our flight several months in advance through the Aer Lingus website. We selected seats 3K and 5K on both flights. These are unique seats on the Airbus that are often referred to as the throne seats. The seats themselves are the same as the others in business class, but they have counter space on both sides so that you feel a little bit more of a sense of privacy. Aer Lingus flies out of Terminal C at Logan, a relatively small terminal that it shares with JetBlue and TAP Portugal. We got there 2.5 hours before departure and found a drowsy scene at the Aer Lingus ticket counter. Check-in went smoothly except that our boarding passes didn't have our TSA pre-check designation on them. The agent was able to reprint the tickets after we gave him our TSA numbers. Aer Lingus does not have a lounge at the terminal, but business class travelers can use the United Club Lounge near Gate 24 in Terminal B. It's a 10 to 15 minute walk past some cramped and crowded gate areas and a number of bars, restaurants, and stores. We were a little put off by the distance, but in the end I was glad we made the walk because the lounge was very chill. It's on the 2nd floor. You have to take an elevator up to it. It's not a huge space and the food selection is limited, but it wasn't crowded at all at that hour, and it turned out to be a relaxing spot to hang in before the big flight. We then walked to our departure gate, C21, at the end of a narrow terminal where we came upon a shocking scene. Okay, it wasn't that bad, but it was very crowded with people, standing room only, and there was a tension in the air as the boarding process was poorly organized.
There was a JetBlue flight to Buffalo leaving from a neighboring gate, and their announcements were coming through loud and clear, but the Aer Lingus announcements were barely audible, and there weren't that many of them. As the scheduled boarding time came and went, the passengers began to surge forward, and somehow the pre-boards busted through. I joked to my wife that this was the first time I'd ever seen passengers take control of the boarding process.
So we fought our way through the crowd and finally, mercifully, got on the jetway and onto the plane. Then we took a left turn and went up the right side to our seats 3K and 5K. These seats were as advertised, with about double the counter space of the other seats. After boarding, I had a glass of champagne, and that was it for the drinking for me. I didn't want to load up on the booze and complicate my adjustment to Irish time. The amenity kit included socks, an eye shade, and a pen, all in Aer Lingus's signature teal blue color. I especially liked the pen. I use pens a lot, and this one writes well. Despite the late boarding, we pushed from the gate on time and got to the runway quickly, where we took off to the south and turned to the northeast for the roughly 6-hour flight to Dublin.
Having such a short overnight flight is tricky because in that 5.5 to 6 hours, you're getting a dinner and a breakfast, so there really isn't that much time left over for sleep. On the bright side, the late departure means you'll likely be tired enough for at least a nap.
Shortly after takeoff, we got these cards for free Wi-Fi. You have to scratch them off to get the code, but it worked, and it was a nice perk to have during the flight. The meal service that began early in the flight deviated some from the menu. The menu offered 3 entrees, including seared salmon, roast pork loin, and tofu curry, plus an express tray with soup for people who want a lighter meal and want it served faster. But on this flight at least, the only choices available were the express tray or the salmon. I don't like salmon, so I went with the express tray. The root vegetable soup was thick, a little sweet, not very salty. It tasted mostly of carrots. It was pretty good. It came with a salad with some big lumps of goat cheese on top. The dessert was different from the one listed on the menu. Instead of the vanilla custard and cinnamon apple tart, we got a raspberry chocolate mousse. It was good and light. The whole meal, in fact, was on the light side, but personally, I didn't mind because of the late hour. My wife has celiac disease, so she pre-ordered a gluten-free meal, and it was a big disappointment. Basically, a pile of fish and shrimp with no sauce to speak of. She couldn't eat much of it. Dessert was sliced pineapple. In hindsight, she would have been better off getting the express tray. The seat was comfortable and all the controls worked. Next to the reading light was a bottle of water. Be sure to save some of it for rinsing after you brush your teeth. It's far preferable to the tap water in the lavatory. Below the water bottle storage was a couple of USB ports and headphone jacks. There are a few cubbies, including one on the floor that is ideal for storing shoes. The remote control is essential in a big seat compartment like this, and mine worked fine. The movie selection was decent. I watched the Oscar winner Anora, and then I put the seat in lie-flat mode and rested as we crossed the North Atlantic and approached Ireland.
When the seat was in full lie-flat mode, I had to scooch up a little bit toward the top of it so that my feet would fit in the cubby. It's reasonably comfortable, especially if you're a back sleeper. I never really fell into a deep sleep, so it was easy for me to wake up for breakfast. My wife, on the other hand, did not wake up, so she didn't get anything. The lesson is, if you're sleeping, they will not wake you for breakfast unless you've made prior arrangements.
The breakfast was good. The bacon roll was filled with Irish bacon, which is more similar to thick slabs of ham than it is to the crispy, narrow strips of bacon Americans are accustomed to. There was this kind of overnight oats thing called Berkshire muesli, topped with coconut flakes and an apple slice. It was pretty tasty. An apple croissant muffin and a glass of orange juice filled out the menu. By the end of breakfast, we were crossing cloud-covered Ireland for our final descent into Dublin. Below were green fields, the occasional ruin, and then we landed and taxied to our gate at Terminal 2. Dublin was damp, cold, and blustery. Deplaning went smoothly, and then we ran into a long line at passport control that moved quickly. The bags were out when we got to the carousel, and off we went. I remember to stop at the Spar store near the Terminal 2 exits and get a LEAP card, a pass that gets you on any of Dublin's trains, trams, and buses. We got a 3-day pass that was about €18 per person, and used it a lot to get around the city. I highly recommend getting a LEAP card at the airport before you head to your lodging.
In my experience, jet lag hits differently every time. On this occasion, I felt pretty crummy by the time we got our taxi to the hotel. I had a bad headache. I felt all washed out like I was hungover or something. Thank heavens then that our hotel, the Intercontinental, had our room ready for early check-in. I was so grateful to be able to lie down and take a 2-hour nap. It was very restorative, and after that, I adjusted quickly to Irish time.
We returned to Boston on a Thursday 2 weeks later, Flight 133, with a scheduled departure of 12:35 in the afternoon, arrival in Boston of 2:40 p.m. Flying time on the return was almost an hour longer than the flight out because we were going against the jet stream. We spent the night before departure at the Crown Plaza Hotel near Dublin Airport. It's a good place to stay if you want to be close to the airport for one night. We hopped on the free hotel shuttle back to Terminal 2 and arrived there almost 3 hours before departure. There's a dedicated check-in area for business class travelers on the left side of the Aer Lingus departures counter. The line there was short. After check-in, it was up an escalator, around some barriers, and through security. They have a cool thing in Dublin called U.S. pre-clearance. It allows U.S.-bound passengers to undertake all customs inspections at Dublin Airport prior to departure. So when you get to Boston, you're done with all that. You just go get your bags, no wait at customs. It's very convenient. We stopped at a couple of places in the duty-free shopping area for last-minute gifts. Among them was a 3-pack of Irish jellies that got confiscated the next day by TSA in Boston. Then we hung out in the Aer Lingus Lounge, which is located by Gate 41. No elevators, you just check in and walk down a long hall into a circular, light-filled space. When you get in, look to the right. There are some good seats up there that face a jetway. The lounge has a small selection of food and drinks. I recommend the sandwiches, particularly the chicken and stuffing version. After an hour or so in the lounge, we left for our boarding gate. In contrast to the one in Boston, this gate area was much more calm and spacious. We were on the St. Lawrence O'Toole, an A330 named for a 12th century Archbishop of Dublin. The boarding process was better organized than the one in Boston. That is, until we got about halfway down the jetway, and all progress stopped. We stood there quite a while, maybe 10 to 15 minutes, without moving an inch. Finally, a gate agent walked by and went on the plane, and eventually he came out and told us we'd be boarding shortly, and we did, but I never found out what the delay was all about. We had the same seats going back, 3K and 5K. I felt like I knew the lay of the land pretty well this time, enough to know to hang my shirt jacket on the little hook on the seat pod once we were airborne. We climbed out of Dublin and over the coast before turning to the west for our trip back. Once again, the flight attendants distributed cards for free Wi-Fi. Meal service began with a tasty snack of cheese and onion biscuits and a small cup of balsamic jelly. The menu had 3 options: beef fillet, roasted cod, and veggie risotto. But as with the outbound flight, there was a glitch. Turned out they only had 3 of the risottos available, and there were many more than 3 people who wanted that dish, including me.
So the risottos were gone, and I was left to choose between the cod and the beef. I like fish, but not on airplanes, so I chose the beef.
Before the entree, a carrot and lemongrass soup topped with crunchy quinoa and pumpkin seeds was served. I liked the soup. It was similar to the root vegetable one we had gotten on the way out. The filet was fine. It was a thick cut cooked all the way through. The meat was tender, the mashed potatoes were silky, and the broccoli and beets were cooked just right. The only component I didn't like was the intensely salty rosemary beef sauce. Dessert was another mousse, this time a strawberry and cream mix on a chocolate sponge. It was airy and tasty. An Irish cheese board was the other dessert option. My wife was offered the same bad gluten-free meal on the flight back. When she demurred, the flight attendant managed to whip up a dish of vegetables over rice. It wasn't great, but better than the pile of fish she was going to get. Even though it was a longer flight, the journey back from Ireland was more enjoyable than the flight out. It was a beautiful day for flying, and there was no pressure to try and get some sleep. I got through Martin Scorsese's marathon feature, Killers of the Flower Moon, and then took a nap.
While I was resting, the flight attendant came over and lowered the window shades for me.
As we came into view of Canada, the flight attendant served a pre-landing snack that was described as an afternoon tea. First was popcorn chicken with sweet chili sauce over a bed of black rice and edamame in a miso sesame dressing. The chicken was good, not super crisp, but savory and tender. The miso dressing barely registered. Dessert was 3 bite-sized treats: a chocolate mousse profiterole, carrot cake, and a frosted brownie that appeared to be a substitute for the lemon raspberry cupcake promised on the menu. It's a good idea to have these bite-sized sweets. They give you a little variety of tastes and textures.
I don't normally drink coffee on airplanes, but in this case I made an exception as I felt like it would be a good time to get a little caffeine in my system.
My wife got a gluten-free version of this snack with grilled chicken instead of the breaded popcorn nuggets. She enjoyed it. I spent much of the rest of the flight admiring the views of the New Brunswick, Maine, and Massachusetts coastlines. I particularly enjoyed seeing the Massachusetts towns of Rockport, Gloucester, and Marblehead jutting out into the Atlantic. The flight wrapped up with an amazing view of Boston. We flew south of the city and swung in over Thompson and Castle Islands before touchdown. The right side was definitely the better side to be on for this approach and landing. Since we had gone through U.S. pre-clearance in Dublin, there was nothing to do at Logan but make the long walk to baggage, get our suitcases, and head to our hotel, the Hilton Garden Inn at Logan. It's a good, if pricey, option that has a restaurant and a gym. I recommend it if you need to stay overnight near Logan. The final tally for these tickets was $2,240 for two, plus a whopping $4,200 for taxes and fees, making the total $6,433, or $3,216 per person. In summary, I mostly enjoyed my flights on the Aer Lingus Airbus A330 from Boston to Dublin and back.
First and foremost, we reached our destination safely.
The A330 is a terrific airplane, and the throne seats lived up to the hype. The seat controls all worked, and it was nice to have counter space on both sides of the seat.
The flight attendants were friendly and helpful. As for the food, I enjoyed the soups and the desserts.
The lounge in Dublin was comfortable, even if it didn't have enough seating. At Logan, the United Lounge was a long walk from Terminal C, but at night at least, it was a pleasant place in which to spend the pre-flight hours.
Now for the negatives. The boarding process in Boston was a mess. The meal service on both flights had some unwelcome alterations to the menu. 3 risottos for the entire business class cabin proved to be woefully inadequate. The gluten-free meals were substandard, and the price was high as what I paid recently for business class service between Chicago and Rome on American. Despite the snags, I think Aer Lingus is a decent choice for travel between Boston and Dublin. If nothing else, the accents of the flight crew will help get you primed for your trip to Ireland. Hope this helps. Thanks for watching.